Yes, we think that America, which is a very young country, has never had its own religion. The religions here now have come across the ocean. It's about time for the American people to grow up a little and develop their new form of worship. Now, every new religion repeats the same message and goals of the old religion because God doesn't change his blueprint. But history teaches us that each country and each generation has to find its own new sacrament and its own new fresh pathway to God, and that's happening here today. You've got on your hands, like it or not, a very large group, millions of us, who use LSD and marijuana for sacred purposes, and there's no reward or punishment your society has that can stop us from our sincere pursuit of God.
Will you yourself use marijuana or LSD?
When and where it's legal, I do. And when and where it's not legal, I use other methods of duplicating this experience. And I'm fighting legally. We've got about 15 lawyers working to make it possible for us to use these sacraments.
Well, since there have been several terms used, avant-garde, underground, experimental films, I don't think any of these are applicable, but generally all three of these terms apply to a kind of film that's usually made by an individual as distinct from a studio type of situation, and that's a film that expresses that individual's work and is oriented to art. That is, that the individual feels himself more related to art in music, poetry, and so on than he does to commercial filmmaking as it generally goes.
Is there any profit in making these films, and where do you play them most of the time?
There's profit in the same sense that there is, again, for a poet or a painter. Some people make a great deal of money sometimes, but mostly the life is pretty struggling and hard. I think it's about comparable to that.
Now, that's a little different. You experiment a lot, right?
Well,
it says, I was just reading this little review here. It says on your feature, Dog Starman, you use painting and scratching on film, distorting lenses, double exposure, and the use of clear leader.
Well, all these different techniques, really it sounds tricky when it occurs in that form, but essentially a film artist or someone who's working in this area of film as a possible art medium is more oriented to the eyes, how the eyes actually see, rather than to photographing a stage play. Now, most of Hollywood they call it photoplays, and it means photographing a stage play. But, for example, with that camera, there would be an ordinary movement that would be called a pan, where he would move that lens, say, from me, I think it's on myself now, over to you. Would you give us an ordinary pan? Smooth and so on like that. Now, per se, the eyes can't actually see that way. Anyone can try this in their room. If they try to move their eyes steadily across a room to make a pan with vision, it's the impossible. The eyes do actually, in fact, instead do this. They jump around. If you would make that same pan again, and while you make it, use the zoom lens very swift and extremely so that you would pick up little bits of objects as you make that pan.
Quick cuts,
You want to
right?
try that?
Yeah.
Well, they'd be cuts and so on.
Yeah.
Or jerk it back and forth even in that sense, picking up different pieces, bits and fragments and putting it together. Well, all right, actually, if you want to just cut that a minute and go back to a regular one, probably that'll look very strange to most people. It won't look like the way they think they see. For one thing, he'd have to practice for hours and hours with a camera, such as I do, hand-holding it and working along with his eyes to get accomplished at that. And secondarily, then, there would have to be a great deal of cutting that would put that together and make it intelligible.
I think that I would attempt to secure some kind of meaningful measuring device so that I would know what was going on, and then begin to apply whatever talents and whatever resources the entire community has to attacking the problem. But I can't find a meaningful measuring device now. We don't know what's going on. We can't even keep up with the sophisticated new drugs that are becoming available.
Well, I think that the entire entire social structure has to prepare some type of an educational program where they can reach the youth from the time of their early impressionable age to convince them of the danger and fully acquaint them with that before it's too late. Now, we have failed to do this in the past. There has been no concerted action on the part of any of the authorities, government or society, to provide this educational program, because it's just like anything else. If the youngster at an early enough age is fully confronted with the danger, they'll respond to it.
$250 micrograms, which is 100 times less than the weight of a postage stamp, is a full adult dosage, and it can reoccur unpredictably. A pound of LSD, and I'm no fright peddler, if put in the unprotected water supply of a city the size of New York, would render the entire population psychotic.
What would your approach be?
This is extremely difficult, but undoubtedly the answer is education. Education of some sort by our physicians, by our educators, and by law enforcement. But I think too much of the burden has been expected of law enforcement. Our job is primarily to detect and apprehend the people who are trafficking in these drugs. This doesn't, and I would be the first to admit, get at the education of the young person that does use it and that is the victim of the peddler.
Medical people as well as educators as to the addictive quality of marijuana. What position does the drug abuse manual take on marijuana?
Marijuana is psychologically, causes psychological dependence rather than physical dependence, but the World Health Organization and the physicians that we've worked with, who are recognized as experts in the field, indicate that psychological dependence is much more difficult to treat and to cure than physiological dependence. So we believe that marijuana does pose a particularly dangerous problem for youngsters.
The question would have come up. We hear rumors occasionally that some of our young high school children or people are using narcotic drugs. 2 years ago, I would have told you, yeah, it's a rumor, but that is all there is to it. We are not finding it in high school. And up to a couple of years ago, we never found any narcotics in a junior high school. But today, I'm going to tell you a different story. That your high schools are loaded with narcotics. This is something that has to be avoided. It is not something that can be experimented with. It is not something that you can take today and leave alone tomorrow. And as I stated at one time, and I think they published it in one of the papers, if you're a young person and someone comes around with this thing, say to them, get lost, punk, get lost.
Bus drivers and the AC Transit Corporation. Both sides are still far apart, according to one bus. The union has moved forward in the statement.
Rightly used, these drugs. See here on the radio, you know, it comes over, C-O-M-P-O-Z. You know, this society has to keep people so drugged, you know, that they can't think as individuals. And they, well, these other drugs, the kind that I consider to be a sacrament, rightly used, can be perhaps... Here. I'll turn this down. These drugs, rightly used, can be perhaps the greatest spiritual boon to mankind that there has ever been in the history of this planet.
The one we had recently was almost incredible. At the time the officers arrived, a marijuana party was, a pot party was in progress, and the floor of the living room was ankle deep in popped popcorn. A psychedelic light show was in progress, as was the smoking of marijuana. The popcorn and the rugs had been sprayed in a psychedelic pattern with spray paint, as had the walls and a variety of other objects, including one young man who was painted from the waist. He was nude from the waist up and painted, including his hair.
A health hazard, both to the people living there as well as to those possibly in the neighborhood?
Probably not only a health hazard, but I just wish that people who are so sure that there is no danger to marijuana, or that it doesn't affect the mind, or it doesn't do this and it doesn't do that, could just see how some of their children and some of their students and some of their patients are living in situations like this.
Testing the quality of narcotics and the substitutes used is done here at the State Narcotics Lab. Full-time chemist agents work with the latest materials rounded up in raids. Much of it comes from below the border. Some 6,000 arrests at the Baja line have been made so far this year, compared with 4,000 during all of 1968. Burning fields and aerial surveillance is decreasing the flow of grass into California. Mexican and U.S. authorities are working closer than ever before in combating drug traffic. It's created a shortage of good marijuana, and the market is being flooded with old but still popular substitutes.
Content of opium from the Far East and so on is something like as high as 18% or even higher in some instances, whereas the opium that's grown around here, even professionally, has a yield of, well,
Well, now that marijuana is becoming a little harder with your intensive controls, a little harder to find, what kind of substitutes are you finding people using?
There seems to be substitutes that are as a result of the lack of marijuana that's presently found in the market. Actually, that's been going on for 20 years and more that I know of. These are ruses. Some of the entrepreneurs and peddlers in Mexico wait for the naive Americans to come down, and they've been selling them bales of grass, hay, the scrapings of the horse barn, and so on for years. But now it's come up between the individuals who are actually selling small amounts in the street. For instance, they'll take the discards of someone who has had some marijuana and manicured it, and take the debris and the seeds and so on, and put it in, involve it in oregano or some other type vegetable material, and sell that in lieu of marijuana.
Well, this is a plant you have over here.
Yes, this is a marijuana plant. This particular one is probably 4 weeks old. It's composed usually of an odd number of leaflets. In this one, there happens to be 5. They'll get much larger and be at least the size of my hand. You'll notice that they're pointed both at the tip end of each leaflet and at the end where it joins the entire leaf. The edges are serrated, and the actual constituent tetrahydrocannabinol and so on is found on the surface of the leaf and on the underside, particularly the female plant. It has the highest yield. Eventually, as it matures out, it has a flowering top, which is a cluster for the seeds and so on at the top of the plant. And both the male and female have a yield of the constituent. If you were to remove the material from each leaflet very laboriously and collect it, you'd have hashish. If you pick the leaf and allow it to dry, crush it and smoke it, you'd have marijuana. That's the difference between hashish and marijuana.
In the marijuana business, like in other businesses, it's the familiar problem of supply and demand. The price of grass is going up. This kilo of marijuana, about 2.2 pounds, was worth $65 2 years ago. Today, it brings about $250. Vern Hawkins, KCRA News, San Francisco.
For one, I think it takes a coordinated effort. The law enforcement is only part of that. Of course, the judicial is another part. The Operation Intercept is a very significant and important change in federal policy toward narcotics. Now, I know it's inconveniencing a lot of people who go to Mexico for other purposes than to obtain narcotics. But there's no question that in California and in Berkeley in particular, a significant supply of the narcotics that are available come from Mexico. Now, shutting off the border, I'm sure, will have an effect.
In the drug centers of the Bay Area, the Haight-Ashbury among them, marijuana is still available. Its price, now more than $200 a kilo, went up beginning last spring. It was less than $100. In the past month, it has continued its climb, but not dramatically. A drug columnist called the Grass Prophet in the Berkeley Tribe says that Panama Red, a potent supergrass from the Caribbean area, is now appearing on the market. While the State Narcotics Bureau says there is a definite reaction to Operation Intercept, some street people disagree. The drug treatment program operates out of an old Victorian in the Haight. Its staff sees all kinds of serious addictive drug problems and keeps tabs on the marijuana situation as well. 23-year-old Bob Cronbach, a Stanford graduate, is a staff member.
The only effect it really has on San Francisco is in the news media, I believe, because I know of some people I know some people for a fact that haven't been affected by it.
What do you
get it any time?
You can get
the gas.
What do you
anytime.
pay? What do you pay? Is the price more now?
Oh, around 150 usually.
150 for what?
Kilos?
$150 a kilo. Now, the
Yeah,
Narcotics
usually, yeah,
Bureau
that-
says over 200.
They're full of
that's the people who don't
bad
know.
information.
That's the
See, they don't buy pot, so they really don't know, man. They only can speak from what other people tell them.
Probably.
Bob, from what you see in the drug treatment center, what is the situation with marijuana now? Is there any available?
Yes, it's still available, and it varies in quality from very poor, which you can still buy at about $10 a lid, and up to grass as high as $25 a lid that's fine quality or whatever.
You say it's available. How available is it?
It's a lot drier than it used to be, but if you hunted, you could find it. And you can still buy it on the street from sellers. It's not that dry.
What seems to be the reason for the slight lack of availability?
Well, the thing's been drying up now for several months. Originally because there was a drought in Mexico this summer, also because just the increase in numbers of users has put a strain on the supply, and also perhaps because of difficulty smuggling it through with Operation Intercept.
Some law enforcement officials say that their clampdown is partially responsible for the high prices and the unavailability of marijuana now. Do you agree with that?
No, not really. It has cut down, for some people, the availability, but those are mostly people like in high schools and suburban areas where they haven't been able to get it that well anyway. In an urban area like San Francisco, it's still very available.
For whatever reason, marijuana is in short supply or is expensive. One result seems to be a move to harder drugs. At the high school level, barbiturates like Nembutal and Secondol are now easier to get than marijuana. They are addictive, and we are told, increasingly popular. Spencer Michaels, KCRA News, San Francisco. There has been testimony at this hearing that anyone can walk down the street in various places in San Francisco and buy dangerous drugs, marijuana and others. Why haven't the police been able to stop this?
Well, of course, here again, everything is dropped on the doorstep of the police. And I'm not making excuses to anybody that we have not done our work, because we only have so many men. And as has been pointed out by Senator Pepper, very clearly that Washington, which is not too different in size, population, and so on from San Francisco, has a couple of thousand more policemen than we have. And this is one of the answers.
I think that we're all too willing to spend millions of dollars on such ludicrous operations as Intercept and on law enforcement ventures, and it's quite apparent that for the most part the law enforcement people have not been doing their job properly. It seems to me that the money could be more effectively spent in treatment and trying to minimize the impact of drug use and try to prevent the kind of criminalization that's developed in the drug scene today. I, for instance, would wonder why federal narcotic agents and state narcotic agents were not aware of the activities of a chemical company selling the precursors of amphetamine. And the reason why they weren't aware is they were spending most of their time chasing nickel and dime users around the street and making life unbearable for them. They were not doing the job that I think we have a right to expect of them.
There were pleas at these hearings for lesser drug penalties, money for drug treatment centers, massive education of youth, and a crackdown on the sales of materials to illicit drug manufacturers. It became obvious that there is disagreement over priorities, but agreement that the problem is so complex that no one solution will work. Spencer Michaels, KCRA News, San Francisco.
Mr. Linkletter, it has been said by pharmacologists here in San Francisco and by others that there is no proven link between taking LSD and suicidal behavior. What makes you think that it was the LSD and not something, say, in the background of your daughter that contributed to her suicide?
Because she called my son Robert 20 minutes before she killed herself and told him. That's why, which is more proof to me than all the scientists in the world. And she had called him on other occasions during the 6 months and told him that she was having a bad trip and felt terrible. And on this particular occasion, she told him she was going to kill herself because she couldn't control these trips anymore, and she thought she was going out of her mind, becoming insane. People like Timothy Leary, who are looked up to by the young people, tell them that taking LSD is not harmful, cannot be harmful, is a religious experience, is a creative experience, is an insight to the person, and therefore, with his background of being a Harvard professor and being an intellectual and being a member so-called of the older generation establishment, educationally at least, they then have justification for any fears against taking this, and they go ahead and they try it. And so anybody who has said anything which would encourage my daughter to take LSD was unwittingly a part of being her murderer. Saddled with the liquor problem. You know and I know far better than you because you're a young man. The prohibition not only didn't work, but it...
Cameras as well as tape recorders were barred from the session. But during the hour-long meeting, much was accomplished. The Rules Committee had seemingly preconceived that Resolution 23 by Senators Moscone and Marks favored one side of the marijuana issue. But Senator Moscone, addressing the members from here, seemingly convinced them that the wording of the resolution could easily be changed by the committee. What really was needed was the gathering of voluminous information on both sides of the marijuana question, social as well as economic.
Well, I don't know that I can please everybody. I hope I'm not that naive. I hope I can tell them I have been rational, as has been the Senate, by creating a select committee that will hear testimony from everybody, experts as well as non-experts, as to some of the evils of marijuana as well as some of those that are nothing more than mythology.
A number of expert witnesses testified both for and against the setting up of an information-gathering select committee. One of those testifying for such committee was Dr. Thomas Ungerleider of UCLA, who for the last 2 years has served on the President's committee to study marijuana and drug abuse.
They'd find out about marijuana and its lack of progression to other drugs and its lack of cause of crime. They'd find that it's not a harmless drug. They would probably most importantly find that our legal system here in California concerning marijuana is one of the worst in the country, with it being a felony arrest and with all that that implies in terms of search and seizure. They would find that we are so focusing, either by intent or because they're there, on the users, that the major sellers, the top of the distribution pyramid, is not being reached. And 4 tons a day, indeed, of marijuana come into the area. That it's being used not just by students or antisocial people, but by a wide variety of people who are older and settled and so forth. That marijuana will not replace alcohol, which is our greatest drug problem and will always be, and is more attuned to a competitive society like this.
No Rules Committee decision today, but ahead, a probable rewording of Senate Resolution 23 and the acceptance of a committee to look into information regarding marijuana and to seek alternate solutions to a problem that both sides agree isn't working. Mike Boyd, KCRA News, at the State Capitol.
We found that the highest statistical, not causal relationship, however, had to do with prior use of 2 other drugs, tobacco and alcohol, prior to marijuana use. If you don't smoke and don't drink, you don't try marijuana. So our highest statistical correlation had to do not with marijuana, but with prior use of tobacco and alcohol. The domino theory, the progression theory, I think, in any causal fashion is certainly untrue.